why reading word by word isn't helpful for comprehension. It really is hard for the mind to hold on to what was just read. If we're able to get kids to read in chunks or phrasing, that really helps with their working memory. That would be like sight word phrases as opposed to learning the sight word all independently. Again, if we can eventually get them to be fluent, that frees your attention so that the reader can focus on their train of thought, switch to momentary complexity, notice the breakdown in how they're making sense of the reading, and reread it to repair that breakdown if they're having trouble. So really you want to build on fluency right away when you're introducing word by word. You don't want to do word by word, just individual words, or it's harder actually for the working memory and processing for students with language or reading disabilities. There are lots of different Orton Gillingham based programs. Orton Gillingham did a great job of making sure that everything was multisensory based. So all of these programs involve all of the senses. There's the Language Toolkit, Alphabetic Phonics, Project Read, Language, the Sunday System, the Wilson Language Training, Singer-Lind Approach, Spalding Method, the Lindemood-Bell, and the Barton Method. Right now the top three, the Lindemood-Bell, the Barton, and the Wilson Language Training are the top three for those with dyslexia. So what's involved in the reading process? Well, the reader has to make sure it makes sense. A lot of planning actually goes into it, but you don't think about the planning. You have to prioritize. You have to understand your background information. You have to self-check to make sure you're making sense of what you're reading. You really have to have a flexible mindset so that you can increase your own understanding, and you have to assess your own reading. This is all found in your book on the pages you'll be reading. So what works best? Really, essential language remediation includes very systematic daily activities, precise steps in how to do those activities, rapid changes of activities, and measures of progress. The best solution to solving reading failures is really early intervention. After 4th grade, reading struggles become extremely difficult to remediate. The majority of young children entering kindergarten and elementary school at risk for reading failure have the potential to learn to read at an average or above average level if they're identified early and given that systematic, intensive phonemic awareness, phonics, reading fluency, vocabulary, and reading instruction, those big five. So what does reading instruction have to include? Well, definitions of words, information on the context, the focus on meaning, their background information, synonyms, antonyms, multiple meanings, connotations, denotations. Students should be able to work independently to learn how to use certain things like a dictionary, the context, the morphology, to understand the meaning of a text. Google will also work as long as they're getting accurate understanding of the meaning of text. This is really important because among 4th graders, 53% of African American students, 52% of Hispanic students, and 48% of American Indian students scored below basic on National Association of Educational Progress reading test. So we still have a long ways to go to help students. The 5 big ideas in reading we've all heard of. I'm going to have you do really briefly. I'm going to have somebody else talk to you for a few minutes and give you some information about phonemic awareness and phonics instruction.
Phonological or phonemic awareness is a crucial factor which predicts how easily your child will develop early reading skills. It has to do with developing a sensitivity to the sound structure in oral language. At its most sophisticated level, it means phonemic awareness. Phonological awareness is the bigger umbrella which subsumes phonemic awareness. Phonological awareness can refer to noticing the words in a sentence, the syllables in a multisyllabic word, and phonemic awareness is much more specific to the individual sounds in a single word. We call these individual sounds phonemes. Phonemic awareness is something that develops over time and can in fact be taught and should be taught. Phonemes are the very smallest units of sound in words. For example, in the word bug, there are 3 phonemes, b, a, g. A child with sophisticated phonemic awareness will be able to substitute the b for h to get the word hug. And she will also know that the initial sound changed, but the rest of the word didn't. When children receive explicit instruction in phonemic awareness, including rhyming games and substitution and segmenting tests with individual phonemes, they are much more successful than their same peers who did not receive similar instruction.
So why is this important? Well, one of the things you need to know about phonemic awareness you're going to be reading in your chapters today. The role of phonemic awareness in phonics. You do need to understand what a phoneme is versus what a grapheme is and how that plays into syllabication.
This refers to the paired associations between sounds in spoken language and letters. It represents the overlap between two areas that I've already talked about today, one being alphabet knowledge and the other being phonemic awareness. If you overlap phonemic awareness and alphabet knowledge, their merger is phonics. It's basically making the connection between sounds in spoken language and how you represent them in written language. Phonics also refers to a method of reading instruction in which orthographic spelling patterns and decoding skills are explicitly and systematically taught with repeated practice. Children need to be explicitly taught spelling rules and orthographic patterns because English, 90% of the time, is a phonetically regular language. And so if we teach children what those paired correspondences are between letters and sounds, then they are going to be better equipped to spell the words that they want to write and read unfamiliar words that they encounter in text. Explicit instruction in sound symbol correspondences is so foundational to word-level reading and should not be overlooked. When students encounter unfamiliar words, they should have at their disposal a vast supply of strategies with which they can attack that word. It's never enough to suggest to a student to guess at the word based on the initial letter and context clues or a picture. Guessing is what we do when we have inefficient strategies. And so if we have prepared our students with phonics rules, then there will be no need to guess at words.
Barton and Linda Bell, which you're going to hear about more coming up. She spoke about the alphabetic principle, and I'm going to have her discuss with you briefly about how to teach the alphabet.
Being able to name the letters in the alphabet is one of the critical predictors of reading success. There are several different activities that you can use to teach your child the alphabet. Most people like to start teaching using the alphabet song, which is a completely acceptable way to start. In fact, most children in this country know that song, could sing it in their sleep probably. That is a perfectly fine way to start as long as you move quickly away from singing the alphabet to saying it. Because if your child can say the alphabet without relying on a melody, then you can be certain that he knows it for sure. I always like to use visual aids, and I think that any teaching, when it can be multisensory, is going to be much more effective. If you can have your child say the alphabet, each letter at a time while pointing to it, they're getting that tactile feedback and also auditory feedback from pronouncing the letter name, looking at the letter, and touching it with his finger. Another really helpful manipulative are these 3D letters. These are mine, and they're just regular block letters that you can do out of order or move around. They can be easily manipulated. And again, it's a letter identification task. Another great teaching tool I like to use is this alphabet mat. It's got the alphabet in block letters across the top as both a reminder and also a point and say task. And then you can also go back to your three-dimensional letters and as a separate or additional activity, put the letters in sequence going around the arc. So up here's my M, I'd place the M on the M, A.
Let's make sure we're not freezing here.
And then B going all the way are going to be really helpful to your child going forward. Simple flashcards are also a great tool. These are my uppercase flashcards, and you just go one by one and ask your child to name the letter as you go through. For more advanced alphabet learners, this is called a missing letter deck. You are prompting the child with 2 letters to give you the third one that's missing. So in this case, it's D, E, and your child will say F. Go on to the next one, F, G, H, and so on. Again, knowledge of letter names is one of the most important predictors of how quickly and easily your child will acquire early reading skills. And it's important that letter names be taught explicitly and directly, starting in preschool.
The last section I'm going to take you through is how alphabetical principle, phonological awareness, and phonics play together to create reading.
Basic letter concepts, such as short and long vowels, graphemes, digraphs, blends, and diphthongs. The vocabulary terms covered in this module form the foundation for understanding phonics instruction, teaching letter-sound connections. The alphabetic principle is the understanding that words are composed of letters that represent sounds. In order for students to understand the alphabetic principle, teachers need to build students' understanding of sounds through phonological awareness activities. Then, to help students understand the relationship between sounds and letters, they need phonics instruction. In this module, we will first develop your understanding of what phonological awareness is and how teachers can develop students' phonological awareness, and then we will review basic letter concepts that serve as the foundation for phonics instruction, the two concepts that undergird the alphabetic principle. Phonological awareness is the ability to detect and manipulate sounds at different levels of sound structure. At the word level, the cat ran down the street. At the syllable level, happy, bonus, echo, notice. At the onset rhyme level, think word families, k, at, full, ag, s, ale, eat. And at the phoneme level, k, a, t. To build phonological awareness at the word level, teachers can use big books or posters of familiar nursery rhymes and have students use a pointer or long ruler to point to the words as the teacher or class recites the rhyme. A syllable is a unit of spoken language that has at least one vowel and may or may not have consonants. That is, all syllables must have one vowel. To teach your students to feel for syllables, tell students to put their hands under their chins while saying a word. When their chin drops, that signals a new syllable. Let's try some together. Put your hand under your chin. Say the words with me. Elephant, lion, animal. Did you feel the syllables as you said each word? Some teachers also teach robot speak. You can say each word as a robot to help you identify a syllable. Elephant, lion, animal. Onsets and rhymes. The onset is the part of the word before the vowel. The rhyme is the part of the word including the vowel and what follows it. Onsets and rhymes are typically taught as word families. In these great books by Sherry Carl, you can see how word families, onsets and rhymes, are taught. In the AI family book, you have snails and trails. The onsets are SN and TR, and the rhyme is AIL.
If any of you use Reading A to Z or Raz Kids, they also have very specific books set up for the same purpose.
Keep in mind that not all words have onsets. For the at family, you may have sat, hat, and at. Thus, sat and hat have onsets, S and H, but at is simply a rhyme. A phoneme is a single speech sound. A, d, t, s are examples of phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest unit of the sound structure. When we teach students to make the sound-to-letter connection, we are teaching phonics. Building students' phonological awareness, familiarity of sounds from the whole word to the phoneme level, will help students learn to hear sounds that they can then connect to letters. To help students make this connection, let's review some basic letter concepts. These concepts and terms form the foundation of phonics instruction. Letters. First, we know that letters can be sorted into two groups, consonants and vowels. As young children, we learn that vowels are A, E, I, O, and U, and consonants are all the rest of the letters. Students will need to know the difference between vowels and consonants when learning rules for pronunciation, syllabification, and spelling. Vowels can be produced as short and long sounds. The breve, shaped like a small U, indicates a short vowel sound, as in a and I. The macron, a small flat line, indicates a long vowel sound, as in a and I. Graphemes refer to letters of the alphabet. Phonemes are the sounds that are represented by graphemes. A digraph is composed of two letters that represent one sound. There can be vowel digraphs, as in AI in rain and EA in seal, and consonant digraphs, like SH in ship and CK in lick. Finally, there can also be consonant trigraphs, like TCH, ch. Consonant blends, unlike digraphs, retain their individual sounds even though they are produced quickly together. Here are some examples of consonant blends. Listen to hear each sound as I produce them. Full, spul, tur, gur, dur, st. Blends retain their individual phoneme sounds and are counted as multiple phonemes. Finally, there are diphthongs. A diphthong is also referred to as a gliding vowel. Diphthongs are two adjacent vowels within the same syllable, like the oi in boy, and soil, poison, loyal, and broil. Diphthongs are counted as one phoneme. Congratulations, you now have a solid phonics vocabulary.
Phonics instruction continues on to include a number of other things not mentioned in the videos. First, long vowels, vowel digraphs were talked about, but there are also R-controlled vowels, affixes, and root words that you'll be learning as you read your chapters this week. Fluency. Really, fluency is related to accuracy and rate. It is characterized by phrasing, natural flow of speech, intonation, stress, and pauses related to the author's syntax or meaning, and being very expressive. There are really three parts of fluency: the speed, which we use measures like DIBELS or oral reading fluency passages to measure speed. We also measure the accuracy, that's the percent of the words they read correctly, and we usually want that accuracy to at least be 90% or above. And then the prosody, that's the appropriate expression. Are we using pauses? Are we checking for meaning? Are we making sure that commas and periods are taken into consideration? Because all of these are affecting our fluency. The next piece of the Big Five is vocabulary. It's really important that students have conversations around vocabulary and that they immediately tie unknown vocabulary to a known vocabulary word. Framing, KU has developed a lot of great ways to assist with that through what's called framing. If you Google it, there are a lot of free frames out there to help with vocabulary, because vocabulary does depend more on exposure to written text than oral language, because it's developed through print. So you really do want to get it in conversation, but also immediately written down in connection with prior knowledge. Repeated reading for students with learning disabilities has been proven to improve reading rate, accuracy, and comprehension. Non-repetitive reading with decodable text can also be helpful in increasing speed, but we want to make sure that vocabulary is put in place. What does comprehension involve? You need your prior knowledge, you need to be able to predict and think ahead. You have to be able to visualize, summarize, question, understand the reader's connection to the text, evaluate or make judgments based on what you're reading, understand the author's point of view, and then synthesize everything that you've read. So there are really 7 principles of reading comprehension. First, the reading has to make sense. Second, the understanding is really the result of planning. It doesn't come naturally. Prioritizing leads to maximizing time and effort. You really do have to gain access to background information to help organize new information. Self-checking is important. Having a flexible mindset to improve understanding, and understanding is improved by self-assessing. So teaching that through modeling is very important. What affects their comprehension? Fluency is a huge portion of what affects comprehension. Also background knowledge and vocabulary, an awareness of how a paragraph is organized and how sentence structure is consistent, and then monitoring. How well can they monitor and apply strategies to fix reading when it's not quite making sense? So children who have difficulty learning to read will likely not benefit from the same kind of reading instruction. They really do need multisensory. Not all components necessarily are done in a day, but they should have all components of reading throughout a week. If early screening and interventions were carried out, children needing services could diminish by third grade. Middle school and high school students are no longer being taught to read, yet 70% of older readers need some form of mediation. So we really want to make sure that we're screening not only for fluency, but really screening for comprehension, for word level, phonics, phonemic awareness pieces. What research says about early reading difficulties. Boys and girls are affected. Girls may not be identified as often. There's not particular intelligence, socioeconomic status, or parent education that changes your likelihood of being identified. Untreated difficulties are persistent and do not go away. About 74% of children identified with reading difficulties in third grade still had these same difficulties in high school. Word reading difficulties can be caused by phonological deficits. The student has trouble breaking the words into phonemes, and that occurs early. You can identify these things. There is some genetic basis. You will see that students with dyslexia tend to have someone in their family who also had dyslexia, dyscalculia, or dysgraphia. Things to look for to identify. If you're looking for any trouble in developing speech, sounds. When you have trouble developing speech, sounds, or language, you're more likely to have trouble developing reading. Not having any interest for books, or not wanting to read, or not wanting to listen while you read. Not enjoying rhyming, can't remember the letter sounds or their names, especially those letters that are in their name that they see consistently. Not recognizing common consistent words. Struggling with taking apart the first sound or the last sound, segmenting words, blending words, and any trouble writing. Later in school, you'll also see poor phonemic awareness, decoding skills, a lot of guessing, a lot of inability to see patterns in words like word families, spelling and vocabulary issues, fluency, and a lot of poor testing skills. So it's really important that we do make sure screening occurs 3 times a year from kindergarten through 4th grade. Really, even Dibbles is coming up with a preschool screener to help assess those pre-reading skills. It's really important in reading instruction to have fluid transitions between the activities, have the students start the activity immediately after seeing it modeled. Students understand the objective. The teacher is able to use different kinds of questioning formats. They all respond, some respond, a few respond. The pace is quick and there's very direct, explicit instruction at some point in time. And there's a lot of scaffolding. I'm going to do it, we're going to do it, you're going to do it. So what's involved in multisensory teaching? Phonology, study of sounds and how they work. The sound symbol association we talked about. Syllables. Morphology, and that's more the base word roots and affixes that you're going to learn. And then syntax, that set of principles that really dictates the sequence and function of words in a sentence. It helps you with the meaning. What else do you need to know? Well, what's most effective when teaching reading instruction is having a lot of repetition. For most students, when you're learning something new, they need 1 to 2 repetition. For your average student, it's 4 to 14. But for your least able student, in order for them to learn something new, it has to be done 20 or more times in a row. In the future classes, you're going to hear about havefunteaching.com. I was going to take you to that site really quickly, but you'll get it in a future class. It has that number of repetitions within the site for students. It can be kind of annoying for us who do not have struggles in reading instruction, but it does give the repetitive piece and puts it into context right away. Positive instructional interactions. It's really important that when teaching reading, we ensure that we're getting a lot of positive instructional interactions. What's the difference between an opportunity to respond and a positive instructional interaction? Opportunities to respond is any opportunity that we give for a student to give us feedback that they're paying attention. For example, everyone hold up your book and turn to page 67. That's an opportunity to respond. Positive instructional interaction is really when the teacher explicitly explains and models the skill, students are engaged, and students are constantly providing feedback as to whether they're understanding. The teacher is providing opportunities for students to perform the skill themselves and reinforces correct responses only. The intensity of instruction improves based on the positive instructional interactions occurring. When you're modeling, leading giving a group test or a delayed test, that activity should change. The student's rate of learning are proportional to the rate in which they respond, so opportunities to respond should be pretty frequent, including positive instructional interactions. What do we know works? Well, we know that continued opportunities to respond is very effective in reading instruction. We also know that for students with disabilities, graphic organizers, strategic and procedural support in writing, and explicit instruction are very effective methods. They're very research-based. What is academic learning time? That's the amount of time a child is engaged in learning. When we're talking about academic learning time, we're going to move on to opportunities to respond. And that is, the more time students are involved, the more that's learned. The more they're on task, the more likely they are to master reading instruction. So how much time should a teacher talk versus a student? Teacher talk should be no more than 40 to 50% of any instructional time, and that is extremely high. When presenting new material, a minimum of 4 to 6 responses per minute with 80% accuracy is needed for most of our students to really master the skill. When reviewing something previously learned, 8 to 12 responses per minute with 90% accuracy is ideal. What does that mean? That means we're going to need a lot of opportunities for children to tell us what they know. How do we do that? Individual questioning. We can call on students. Remember, when you call on students, always say the question before you give the student's name, because if you say the name first, it gives everybody else a free ride to check out. Choral responding is okay. It's suitable at some points in time, but I recommend things like write it on the whiteboard or things that give you signal, and that go fast and lively pace is really important, as opposed to everyone saying the same thing, where students can kind of zone out or not be talking and not know if they're really with you. Nonverbal responders, clickers are great, thumbs up, thumbs down, notes, sticky notes. These 2 videos have examples of opportunities to respond. I'm not actually going to have you watch them, because in some of the videos the opportunities to respond are fast, and in some of the videos the opportunities to respond are slower. What I am going to have you do is, later on our last video for this week, I'm going to have you look at these 2. There are a number of things that are wrong in the opportunities to respond, and there are a few that are correct. I'm going to have you talk about that next week. So you won't see this week, you'll see it again next week, and you're going to be talking a little bit about it then, but I just wanted you to know what's coming. This is the extra slide that I gave you below. It's just to help you with helping students with ways they can agree, disagree, or clarify, as we don't have communication skills that are as accurate lately as we used to. There are a bunch of technology freebies. I'm not going to walk you through each of these sites, but they are amazing sites to help with reading disabilities, with learning. You're going to get the opportunity to do a site on study for your 1 of 7 assignments, where you just choose 1 of 5. And that is one of the things, is to explore some of these websites. But I am going to move you on to your next video, and your next video is to English speech sounds. This woman is from Britain, and it's super old, but what's very important is when we teach speech sounds to students, it is very important that we teach that sound correctly, as that is one of the major indicators for phonemic awareness and phonics problems in later reading with students, is the way in which they were taught sound instruction. So I want you to really listen as she teaches this, and pause and go through it with her when she pauses you. It's important to make sure that you're saying that sound correctly. Make sure to put your hand on your throat to double check which sounds. Watch your tongue position. Even if you use a mirror or have students use a mirror, that can be helpful, but make sure you're really working hard on that sound process. The first 3 chapters of this book are really important to have read in order to understand later what we're getting into in this course. So be sure to read those chapters and either write a reflection or take the quiz on those chapters. You also need to make sure you present at least 1 of the 5 in this course. There are examples of some of the others to follow if you're wondering what other students did for their 5 of 7 or 4 of 7. There are examples there. Once you have watched this last video and read through the PowerPoint presentation, you are set to move on, and we'll have completed everything for this week's course.